Plenty of butterflies here, so what's happening?
Well, this is not news. As soon as we start doing a survey, people are saying to us, what are you going on about? We've had hundreds. We've had lots of monarch butterflies. If you have swan plants in your garden, then you're going to have male monarchs flying up and down waiting for the females to come by. And the females can, both genders can smell a swan plant from 2 kilometres away. So the females, their duty is to go from swan plant to swan plant laying eggs. But for some reason, they're not laying eggs on some of the plants around. And mine are very well established, and I'm quite sure that there are no sprays in my neighbourhood.
Very interesting.
So we're doing an analysis at the moment to see if we can't find out if it's climate or weather or some reason.
Gosh, so you're a bit stunned. So yes, indeed, Jackie, because I live not far from you. In fact, I live kind of the next block over, really, or sort of precinct over, Waterview area. So I'm not seeing any sort of.
Oh yes.
And one of the reasons I got me interested because my little boy just absolutely adores 1.5-year-old. Absolutely adores butterflies. Talking to the butterfly exhibition, it gets him excited. So I'm trying to propagate butterflies. Can't do it. Any tips?
Is there a Lepidopterist Association?
Well, that's why we formed the Monarch Butterfly Trust, to help monarch butterflies and help improve the education of the understanding of butterflies, because people think that you mustn't touch them, and there's all sorts of, rumours. God, I can't think of the word. But there's all sorts of misinformation about them, and then when I started the Monarch Butterfly Trust, people said, but what are you doing about New Zealand's butterflies? And I had to admit that I knew nothing whatsoever about any New Zealand butterflies. So we changed the name eventually to the Moths and Butterflies of New Zealand Trust. And it's just wonderful telling people that we do have some really beautiful butterflies in New Zealand and they need to be saved.
Yeah, very good. Well, we'll leave you there, Jackie, but a bit of a mystery there. Jackie and I found out of the Monarch Butterfly New Zealand Trust.
But they were worried about Roundup at Isle Park, weren't they?
Yes.
They thought it might be, the spraying might be effective.
Yes, but apparently that this issue predates. It goes right back to the 50s. They both kind of started declining. But kind of speaks to that whole issue, doesn't it, Tabor, of the our biodiversity in general in New Zealand is not in particularly good shape, is it? You know, there are some things that we have has been part of our garden and our freshwater species and native birds that aren't doing well. It's a nice reminder that we need to actually look out for our species, huh?
Yeah, and I mean, as you were talking about your little boy, I was also thinking, are we teaching kids these things in schools?
That's a good point,
and are they learning about the nature and are they learning about gardening? Because that's so important. That's how we'd know what's happening with the monarch butterflies.
Yes, that's true. There's a bit of a knowledge gap there, isn't it? Speaking of education, speaking of learning, 30 seconds, we haven't got a lot of time for this, but in terms of giving your kids the talk, the sex talk, we had an article here. What age do you think is appropriate to start having those conversations before we head off?
When they ask you.
When they ask you, Tabor?
Look, I think it's really important for kids to be kids, so I would wait till they were 18.
18, yeah.
That's when we have the talk.
Yeah.
No, totally disagree, sorry. No, sooner the better, and just be gentle about it, and just say, look, men and women and other partners.
You've been a wonderful panel, Tabor Khan and Peter Elliott. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's programme, an unbelievable tale of survival. 3 crew are found walking on a beach hours after their helicopter crashes into the ocean in the pitch black while on a rescue mission near Auckland Islands. In a long-forgotten community, trees are sprouting, but what about jobs? Checkpoint's Alex Perrottet heads to Manganui. 4 Indian students deported from New Zealand after being caught up in an immigration scam are now allowed back. Their lawyer is calling for a widespread amnesty for others. More than 8 years after the Christchurch quakes, one frustrated homeowner wants a Royal Commission of Inquiry into the insurance industry and a cheque to repair his house.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leia tawa tēnei. 3 helicopter crew members who survived a crash in the sub-Antarctic Ocean last night have made it safely back to the mainland. The men, 2 pilots and a St John paramedic, walked into Southland Hospital in Invercargill this afternoon after being flown there by rescue helicopter. They had been on their way to medically evacuate a person from a fishing boat when they crashed near the Auckland Islands, about 450 kilometres south of New Zealand. A piece of wreckage later confirmed to be their aircraft's door was found in the sea this morning, and just before midday the men were found alive on an Auckland Island beach after being missing more than 16 hours. The Otago Rescue Helicopter Trust's chief pilot, Graham Gale, who helped transport the men to the hospital, say their survival is unbelievable.
You know, you go to one of the furthest places that we go to in New Zealand, you know, certainly the furthest south in New Zealand that helicopters actually operate. It's a very remote place, and we've always said, you know, if anything ever goes wrong, you know, we can only ever get ourselves out of trouble, and that's really what's happened this time.
Graham Gale says the men appear to be in reasonably good shape, but they're now being checked at the hospital. The death toll from the Easter Sunday attacks has risen to 310. A day of mourning is being held throughout Sri Lanka, during which 3 minutes of silence will be observed for the victims. Flags have also been lowered in commemoration of those who lost their lives in the wave of explosions at churches and hotels. The BBC's Sharanjit Lael reports from the capital, Colombo.
It is morning here, a new day in Colombo, and we know a nationwide state of emergency's been declared. That came into effect just a few hours ago, and that will give the government sweeping powers to detain and arrest suspects. Now, today is also an official day of mourning, and we expect to see more funerals take place today. More of that outpouring of grief and shock that we've seen the city experience over the last 2 days.
Sharanjit Lael with that report. People directly affected by the Christchurch terror attack can now apply to stay in New Zealand permanently. Immigration New Zealand has created a special visa category for those directly impacted by the shootings at Masjid Al-Noor and the Linwood Islamic Centre, as well as their families. Here's political reporter Yvette McCullough.
The government says the Christchurch Response 2019 visa category has been created to recognise the impact of the tragedy and to give people currently on temporary and resident visas some certainty. Applications can be made from tomorrow by anyone who was present at either mosque during the attacks and their immediate family. Because of the special circumstances, the definition of immediate family also includes dependent children, someone's partner's parents and grandparents of children under 25. From Parliament, Yvette McCullough.
The main Anzac Day dawn service in Christchurch will go ahead as usual on Thursday with extra police and security precautions. Services elsewhere in the country have been cancelled in the wake of the mosque massacre, including 2/3 of the events usually held in Auckland. One service in the Christchurch suburb of Sydenham has also been cancelled. At the Central City Service in Cramner Square, the City Council says vehicle access will be restricted and there will be occasional bag checks. A 10 o'clock citizen service will also be held in the Transitional Cathedral in Latimer Square. Government agencies have been given an extra 2 months to publish exactly how they go about gathering information and undertaking surveillance. The State Services Commission's original deadline of April the 30th has been extended to June the 30th to give some agencies with complex policies more time. Here's political reporter Joe Moyer.
The change comes on the back of an inquiry into the use of external security consultants, following revelations that the private security firm Thompson & Clark, working on behalf of Southern Response, attended and recorded several closed meetings of insurance claimants. For the first time, government agencies have been required to be transparent about the types of information gathering they undertake, the reasons for it, and what it might be used for. The State Services Commissioner Peter Hughes says most of them are on track to meet the original deadline next Tuesday. From Parliament, Joe Moyer.
8 people have been injured in a 3-vehicle crash in Manawatu this afternoon. The police say it happened about 20 to 3 at an intersection in Tiakitahuna, southwest of Palmerston North. 2 people were initially trapped in vehicles. The US Supreme Court has agreed to hear arguments about whether gay and transgender workers are properly protected from workplace discrimination. The judges have agreed to take up the case of a skydiving instructor and a former child welfare officer who say they were sacked because of their sexual orientation. A third case centres on a funeral home director who was fired after changing gender. The Trump administration has said that civil rights laws do not apply to sexual orientation or gender identity. It's just after 5:05. The Tactics are desperate to turn around their ANZ Premiership netball season when they host the third-placed Northern Stars in Christchurch tonight. The home side has won just 2 of their 9 games and sit at the bottom of the competition. Coach Marianne Delaney-Hoshek says the shooting circle needs to even out the workload more, with too much pressure being placed on goal shoot Ali Bird at pivotal moments.
Ideally, we'd like the Golden Attacks to be putting up at least 5 a quarter, and obviously that wasn't the case in the last game, but that certainly is the instruction. I guess because Ali's shooting so well, she is a really good option, but it does limit our variety, so we do need to have a goal attack that's willing to come in and put those shots up.
Marianne Delaney-Hoshek. The match starts at 7:40 tonight. The Chiefs coach Colin Cooper has dismissed any possibility of former All Black Aaron Cruden returning to the Super Rugby franchise this season. There's been speculation the Chiefs may look to draft in Cruden, who was reportedly keen to leave French club Montpellier, having struggled with form and injuries. The Chiefs have suffered a series of long-term injuries to key playmakers, including Damien McKenzie, but Cooper says he doesn't see Cruden being an option and they will look locally for replacements. The Liverpool football great Robbie Fowler has made his first serious move into coaching after being named head coach of A-League strugglers Brisbane Roar. That's the news.
Finding the culprits.
Where that happened is 50 metres away from the road. They drove into the park and lined them up and flattened them. The tyre mark is still there. They turn around and come back again.
Finding the cops.
Nothing wrong with striving to be ambitious, but if you're going to be ambitious, you're going to be held to account for your promises. And this was a recurrent theme of this government.
And finding the cash.
The transition to a low-carbon economy and how we adapt to the future of work, plus all of the usual cost pressures we have.
We've got you covered. Morning Report, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, could a 3D printed heart point the future of organ donation? And after 10, our famous wartime resistance fighter Nancy Wake inspired the New Zealand women's rugby team. Join me, Lynn Freeman, and for Catherine Ryan after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service till midnight tomorrow. Northland through to Waikato, including Coromandel. Long fine spells, a few showers, some heavy and thundery with hail, easing this evening. Bay of Plenty, Waitomo, Taranaki and Central High Country. A few showers today, areas of cloud tomorrow. Manganui to Kapiti Coast, isolated showers clearing tonight. Otherwise mostly fine with areas of low cloud, mainly morning and night. For Gisborne, showers possibly heavy and thundery tomorrow. Hawke's Bay, Waidat Upper and Wellington, occasional drizzle, clearing in Wellington tomorrow. Nelson and Marlborough, showers clearing today, morning and evening cloud tomorrow. For Marlborough Sounds and Kaikoura Coast, Canterbury and Otago, mostly fine, however areas of low cloud and patchy drizzle morning and night. Bulla and Westland fine today, cloudy periods tomorrow. Fiordland and Southland mainly fine inland, but a few showers developing about the coast this evening. Chatham Islands often cloudy, patchy drizzle. It's 5:08. You're with RNZ National.
Thanks, Susanna, and I'm Lisa Owen. If it wasn't actually true, it would be unbelievable. 3 men are alive after their helicopter plunged into the sub-Antarctic Ocean in the pitch black. And to boot, their emergency beacon didn't go off. The 2 pilots from Southern Lakes Helicopters and a St John medic were on a rescue mission to pick up a patient on board a fishing boat. But about 16 hours after their comms went silent, the walking wounded, as they've been described, were found on a beach on the Auckland Islands, about 450 kilometres south of New Zealand. Rescue pilot and CEO of Helicopters Otago, Graham Gale, told reporters today it was a very unlikely tale of survival.
This here was unbelievable. I think, you go to one of the furthest places that we go to in New Zealand, certainly the furthest south in New Zealand that helicopters actually operate. It's a very remote place, and we've always said, if anything ever goes wrong, we can only ever get ourselves out of trouble. And that's really what's happened this time, so, there's been a lot of people in the background. RCCNZ have done a fantastic job. They had the Orion down there early last evening, and the fishing fleet has been fantastic. You know, they had 5 or 6 fishing vessels in the area late last night that responded, and they were still there today when we went down there. So, you know, that was pretty special, you know, to see all those guys out working. And so, and of course, well, the outcome is just unbelievable. You know, it's an outcome that I don't think anyone really expected. So, you know, I think there's going to be a couple of drinks had tonight.
Lloyd Matheson from Southern Lakes Helicopters was actually supposed to be on the ill-fated flight, but he swapped shifts with a colleague. He says the news today couldn't be better.
We were prepared for the worst, and we've got a really good result, so absolutely over the moon.
What do you know about what happened?
It'll be subject to an investigation, so all I know is that the aircraft finished up in the water near its intended landing site at Enderby Island about 7:30 last night. We lost communications about 2 minutes out from landing, and as a result of full search and rescue operation swung into action, and great support from the Air Force, who had an Orion overhead during the night, and the fishing industry rallied around, and we had 5 fishing support vessels in the vicinity within 3 or 4 hours of the balloon going up. So we had this great support all around. And following up, we've had huge support from likes of Air New Zealand and the community, and the phone's just gone mad with support. So it's a great outcome.
So where were these guys actually found?
They were found on the main Auckland Island, on a beach close to probably 2 to 3 k's away from the site where the aircraft finished up in the water.
So Lloyd, did they have to swim ashore, or what happened around that?
No, I can't tell you that because we haven't talked to any of the crew yet. They're still on their way back from down there, but they've definitely been in the aircraft in the water, and they've had to get ashore. So amazing feat. I understand one of our crew was knocked unconscious on entering the water, so to get out of an aircraft that's ditched in the sea at night with no lights, no community around to support them, it's just supports the training that we've put into these unexpected occurrences that front us now and again.
So who got knocked out?
My winch crew, I believe. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about it, because I imagine the water is pretty chilly down there. How are they dressed? What do you think has helped them out in this situation?
Oh, I think all the survival gear, immersion suits, life jackets, EPIRBs. Well, they didn't go off, so we've got to look into that. But the Hewitt training that goes with it, which is part of our requirements. So all those things combined, and the longevity of our crew that have been around for quite a number of years that have worked together, has obviously been a team effort to get everyone out safely and ashore.
And how are they?
Probably describe them as walking wounded. I believe that they're still en route to hospital. They should be there any time now, so for a check-up. So I think there's some minor injuries, but nothing life-threatening.
So were they sat on the beach overnight, or what did they do while they were waiting to be found?
I can only speculate. I haven't talked to them, but there've been not many places to go down there, so I assume they would have been on the beach overnight. And the weather was not deteriorated during the night. There was squally, southerly sort of weather went through early hours this morning, so it wouldn't have been comfortable, but I can only speculate.
So their families, I mean, well, had they prepared for the worst, I imagine?
Well, I dealt with them during the night several occasions, and they were being positive, but thinking that the odds were against everything, particularly at night. So, yeah, I wasn't around when they heard the news, but I could just imagine it would be the same as what happened in the office here when we were working on the outcome. It was just fantastic. Jubilation.
Lloyd, are you surprised that it's turned out this way?
Absolutely.
Why is that?
Just as I said, the circumstances, nighttime in the water, unconscious crewmen, and we've got 3 guys that are around to tell the tale. So, that's why I'm surprised. I just think it's a great outcome.
God, they must be the luckiest men alive today, that's for sure.
Lotto time, isn't it?
Exactly. Time to go out and purchase a ticket. You said this crew is really experienced. Can you tell us a little bit about them? Would they have found themselves in a situation anything like this before?
I don't believe so, no. But we train for it, we're not used to this sort of thing. We always are successful in our operations, and there's something happened that's a bit untoward on this one, and we need to investigate why it's happened.
Do you know what weather conditions were like at around 7:30 last night, where they were?
I believe the weather conditions were good. The aircraft was on the final approach. It was a straightforward flight all the way to the island, so we just can't understand what went wrong at the finish.
Lloyd, can you tell us a bit of the backstory? What were they doing heading out there when they were? What was happening?
There was a ocean-going trawler with a sick patient coming up from this between Macquarie Island and Northern Islands, and we decided to position the aircraft into Enderby on the evening to overnight at a dock hut, which was going to allow a little weather front to go through, and we were to extract the patient first thing this morning and come up behind the weather front so that it was all done safely. So the reason for overnighting was just to work in the Southern Ocean the best weather conditions that we could do with the circumstances that were given to us.
So they were basically on a rescue mission, and then they kind of turned into the mission?
Absolutely.
Hey, you mentioned that the EPIRB didn't go off because they had beacons with them, didn't they, but just didn't work?
Yeah, we don't know why that's happened, but that'll be part of the investigation. So
how were they found then? Did someone spot the wreckage, and who found them exactly?
Sir Richard Hayes from our company was one of 3 searching aircraft that departed and went to Enderby Island, and he picked up the last known location and was just making a simulated run onto the landing site at Enderby Island when one of the crew observed orange immersion suits on the beach opposite, and they turned and found the 3 guys standing there.
Have you spoken to Sir Richard?
It's very just briefly on a set phone, but comms weren't that great, but I'll be talking to him shortly. It's been another hour before he gets into land, so I'll have a quick briefing then.
So, Lloyd, when you get the call and they say that these guys are alive, what was that like?
That was just great. No, it was just absolutely great. I can't describe it any better. All my Christmases come at once.
Hey, weren't you supposed to be on this chopper?
Yeah, originally I was, yeah. But I swapped shifts, and I'm sure my offsider won't swap a shift again with me.
And that was Lloyd Matheson, who's from Southern Lakes Helicopters. And as you heard there, he was actually supposed to be on that flight, but swapped a shift with one of his colleagues. Our reporter Tess Brunton is outside the hospital in Invercargill and joins us now. Hi, Tess. What is the latest there?
So we're actually just about to watch a Southern Lakes helicopter take off. They've put a few bags in there, but otherwise haven't been speaking to media. But we had 2 helicopters arrive just shy of an hour ago, and all 3 men walked in for a checkup in their bright orange flight suits. Injuries are unclear, but they all did walk in, and it seemed like they were having a bit of a joke on the way. So from what we're sort of seeing, it looks like they're in pretty good spirits to be rescued so soon after an ordeal.
So unaided, they were able to get out of the rescue chopper and walk themselves into the hospital?
They all walked themselves. There was not a stretcher. There was not someone leaning on anyone else. It was just they all walked in like you'd hope they would.
Remarkable. Hey, do we know what's happening next, where they're headed? Is that chopper there to take them home?
No, well, as the helicopter has only had one person enter it, doesn't look like this is their ride home. And at the moment, until they've had that checkup, it's not known where they'll be going. We understand that some of the men are from Tiano, so it will just depend on when they'll be heading home.
Thanks so much for joining us. That is Tess Brunton, who's outside the hospital in Invercargill. As she mentioned, the 3 men rescued from that chopper crash are there for a checkup but walked unaided from the rescue helicopter to the hospital. To Sri Lanka now, where a national day of mourning is being held for more than 300 people who were killed in the weekend bomb attacks. Many funerals for the victims are also being held today. The attacks have been blamed on a local Islamist group, but authorities say their scale indicates the bombers probably had help from outside the country. And while questions are still being asked about the government's prior knowledge of the attacks, Sri Lanka remains on high alert after more explosives and detonators were found yesterday. The BBC's Nick Beak is in the capital, Colombo.
This could have been any one of hundreds of families in Sri Lanka today, mourning a loved one who will now be buried at the church where they were murdered. In this Colombo street, it was Mariant's Niranjan's family, their eyes fixed on the 36-year-old's lovingly wrapped body. His brother later told us how he took him to hospital, watching as life ebbed away. Across this city and across the country, people were asking whether all this could have been stopped. The Prime Minister had admitted that intelligence about possible attacks on churches had not reached him. His Chief of Staff, Hemasuru Fernando, who's also Defence Secretary, rejected the accusation that Sri Lankans had been badly let down.
The intelligence never indicated that it's going to be an attack of this magnitude. They were talking about isolated 1 or 2 incidents, not like this. And also, besides, there is no emergency in this country. We can't request the armed forces to come and assist us. We can only depend on the police. So we have informed the police.
At the Shrine of St. Anthony's, where what's left of the roof is a chaotic jumble of red tiles, the chief priest, Jude Fernando, was comforting his parishioners. He told us more than 1,000 worshippers had packed the church on Easter Sunday. During the Mass, he briefly stepped out to pick up some notices he'd forgotten, a recollection he believed that saved his life.
And then I went inside with the blast. I had never heard a blast like that. I went inside and I saw the casualties. We rushed people to the hospital.
How does that touch you this morning, knowing that you've been saved and 300 others lost their lives?
I have to just thank God. I don't know that He's saving and saved me. I'm still shocked.
Amid the shock, there's been concern that more attacks were to come. With good reason. A short distance from St. Anthony's, another device exploded as the bomb squad were moving in. Mercifully, no injury or death today. Sri Lanka is now officially in a state of national emergency. The police and the military have the power to detain and interrogate suspects without court orders. After yesterday's horror, they pray there will be no more killing. But with the perpetrators staying ominously silent, Sri Lanka is fearful.
Nick Beak reporting. It is 23 minutes after 5. We'd love to hear from you. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National, and you can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email us at checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Love to hear your views on anything you've heard on the program so far today. A year on from $1 million investment in Forestry, the Bay of Plenty village of Manganui is showing seeds of promise, but the number of jobs initially promised is now being described as aspirational. After the plug was pulled on a roaring logging trade in the 1980s, many in the village lost their jobs and lost hope. But since its settlement with the Crown, Ngāti Whare invested in a local nursery, which attracted a $5.8 million boost from Shane Jones's regional money bag. And now it's leading the way in regrowing New Zealand's native forests. But is it also another case of the government over-promising? Our reporter Alex Perrottet and cameraman Dan Cook went to Manganui to investigate.
Nestled in the foothills of the Uraweras, winter comes early in Manganui. The angled sun casts long shadows on the frosty lawns. Some of those lawns are well kept, while others are out of control and growing over long-abandoned, burnt-out homes. It's been decades since the glory days of the sawmills, when the plentiful supply of native trees was logged and people lived well. Now there's fewer than 200 people in the village and no shops. But even before the government's cash injection here, a new seed began to sprout. Ngāti Whare opened a nursery to propagate native trees and regenerate hundreds of hectares of the Whirinaki forest. And the project has given both the old and the new generations a new purpose. 24-year-old Te Aue August was idle, unemployed and, well, growing other things.
I used to be a hardcore marijuana smoker. And when they offered me a job, I went cold turkey. That was the hardest time of my life.
Really? So how long ago was that?
So I've been here for over a year now, and it took me, from the first day she offered me a job. So that's about a year ago now. I've been clean, and it took me this job.
And they test regularly here?
Yeah, they do.
And what happens if they find a bit of a...
Sayonara. It is pretty much see you later.
But her boss, Mere George, says it's not as simple as that.
It is very different to, I guess, other workplace policies. We've got the ability to have, low-risk jobs. So rather than it be a barrier to employment, we work very closely with our team members to pass drug tests and provide incentive.
Mere George says thanks to the Growth Fund, productivity has increased from 80,000 to 400,000 plants in the last financial year. She expects this financial year to close with 1.2 million new trees. She says there's now 18 full-time workers, and by the end of winter, that figure will more than double to 40. But that's a far cry from the 90 jobs that were promised to many locals who are still on the waiting list.
There was a fair amount of creative media reporting on the 90 jobs. So we intend to have 90 jobs, but the timescale was within a much longer period.
But that number, 90, isn't a media creation. It's from Shane Jones himself in last year's press release spruiking his investment in the nursery. In his visit to Manganui, he stood by the number.
Well, the 90 figure is aspirational, and I'm not going to resile from it. I do feel the greatest challenge in this type of enterprise is filling the order book. So when the order book grows, then obviously my confidence about the durability of the business will grow. But as I am sitting here today in Manganui, when I look at the young people, when I look at the infrastructure that's being built, and I hear from the commercial advisor, I leave Manganui very, very confident.
So confident in what's being done here among the free-roaming horses of Manganui, Mr Jones showed his disdain for the naysayers and even seemed to be making policy on the hoof.
We won't be reviewing, we'll just be changing it. We need to create jobs and industry, because this is all going to grow exponentially.
The minister saying he'll push to change the law allowing greater harvesting of native plants for products such as furniture, and it could happen thanks to cutting-edge technology that's being trialled right here in Manganui. A special hormone is added to rimu, kahikatea, totara and miro clippings, which are then replanted, helping them to grow their own root system and become new trees. The method means they'll grow faster, in greater numbers and at a far higher success rate than growing with seeds. And for Te Aue August, the growing bank account is also starting to make a difference.
We can afford to buy paint, fix our fences, finally start getting parts that we couldn't afford for our houses.
Thanks to the jobs at the nursery, people in Manganui village have been able to live better. Some have been able to do up their houses. But buildings such as the Manganui Community Store and the Post Office still lay derelict and abandoned. Now, the Manganui Village Incorporated Society, pretty much the local council here, has been in a lengthy conversation with the landowners, Ngāti Whare, to do something about these buildings, either knock them down, reinvest, or even give the locals the power to occupy them and do something about them themselves. It's become a lengthy, protracted legal conversation, and until something's done about them, these buildings still send the message the Manganui village is the village time forgot. Winiata Tamaki is in charge of the Incorporated Society and says he's still waiting to hear back from Ngāti Whare.
It was a list of 21 questions that we wanted answered. We took that to the meeting and they have had to consult their lawyers to find possibly the correct answers to give to us. My key one is to have everyone on the same level, to have that ownership that they own their home, that they have the right to occupy the land that that home is on, and then we can move forward in terms of, or they could move forward in terms of having their homes repaired. Without that clarification, it's not going to happen.
Bronco Carson is the chair of Ngāti Whare Group, which owns the land at Manganui.
We are forever actively working on things to better Ngāti Whare and Manganui and Te Whaiti within the rohe of Ngāti Whare. Little steps, we aren't making promises. We wait until we've achieved something and then we communicate it out because we don't want to build expectations. This employment platform here, it was something that Ngāti Whare funded ourselves, and with what's happened we're in the right place at the right time. So we as iwi are taking the initiative in terms of fronting up with our own coin to get things going.
That coin has indeed been invested. The Waikotikoti Marae has almost completed its $1 million refurbishment and has its official opening this weekend. But Winiata is clearly unsatisfied.
We're always constantly asking, when is the next meeting, when is the next meeting? And it's just, time in terms of waiting for the other parties to come and say, hey, we're ready to meet.
But in the meantime, people like Te Aue August are standing on their own feet. Her father and her 2 siblings are working here as well. With a growing workforce, they say others in town are cashing in, with 2 other families making and selling lunches to the staff. And for Te Aue, it's not just a job. She's keen to pass on her knowledge to others, including the minister.
Kānuka seed's smaller and the Manuka seed is a bit bigger.
How about girls? Do not play.
Te Aue says the job has changed her life and given her a reason to aim even higher.
I'm saving because, I want a life. Yeah.
And you're going to live in Manganui?
For the time being, but I see myself spreading my wings.
And that was Te Aue August ending that report from Alex Perrottet and Dan Cook. And you can see that piece online. We'll put it up on our website page and Facebook. And coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, 4 Indian students who were kicked out of New Zealand because their immigration agents falsified documents have been granted visas to return. People with disabilities launched a petition urging the government to speed up the time it takes to get basic bathroom modifications done, and the water spouts that have got Auckland talking. We would love your feedback. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. And a few of you are getting in contact wanting to know what happened to the sick person that the helicopter crew were going to pick up as part of the Medivac. While Maritime New Zealand says that person was transported to Bluff by boat. Time for the news now.
3 helicopter crew who survived a crash in the Southern Pacific last night have arrived in Invercargill. The 2 pilots and a St John paramedic were flown by rescue helicopter to Southland Hospital this afternoon. They're described as being walking wounded. The crew were heading to medically evacuate a person from a fishing boat when their helicopter crashed in the sub-Antarctic Ocean, 450 kilometres south of the mainland. One was knocked out but still managed to escape, and the men were found alive on a beach after being missing for more than 16 hours. The death toll from the Easter Sunday bombings in Sri Lanka has jumped to 310, with 500 people wounded. A day of mourning has been declared for those killed when 8 blasts ripped through churches and hotels 2 days ago. Global agencies such as Interpol and the FBI are helping investigate who was responsible. A police spokesperson says about 40 suspects have now been arrested, all of them Sri Lankan. People directly affected by the Christchurch mosque terror attacks can now apply to stay in the country permanently. Immigration New Zealand has created a special visa category in the wake of the shootings at Masjid Al-Noor and the Linwood Islamic Centre. The Christchurch Response 2019 category recognises the impact of the tragedy and gives people currently on temporary and resident visas some certainty. Due to the special circumstances, immediate family has been widened to include a partner's parents and grandparents of children under 25. The main Anzac Day dawn service in Christchurch will go ahead as usual on Thursday with extra police and security precautions in the wake of last month's terror attacks. One service in Sydenham has been cancelled, as have those elsewhere in the country, including most events usually held in Auckland. A citizen service will also be held in the Transitional Cathedral in Christchurch's Latimer Square. The Auckland Council has given the go-ahead for a controversial extension of Queen's Wharf. The 90-metre-long concrete extension, called a dolphin structure, will allow huge cruise ships to berth there. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Time for business news now with Madison Reddy. Hi, Maddie.
Hello.
Fonterra, now, they were wanting to sell Tip Top business. Where are things at there?
I checked in with Fonterra about this morning, and they say that they're currently mulling a number of offers to buy the Tip Top business that are on their table at the moment. Now, they say they have a number of them, but they obviously wouldn't tell me how many offers they've received and who they're from. It's a very confidential process here that's being led by the investment banking firm FNZC. Now, these bids, we do know, were received by the interested buyers back in March. On March 11th was when the tender process closed, although revised bids are expected to land on Monday. So a decision on who they'll pick as the buyer of Tip Top will obviously come after that, but they wouldn't give us, again, an exact timeline or when they plan to have a deadline to pick one of those buyers. Now, Tip Top was put on the block last year. It's part of Fonterra's wider plan to slash about $800 million of debt this financial year and cut capital expenditure by about $221 million. It's reviewing all of its assets. Tip Top was just one of the ones that were put on the block pretty early on in that review. And they say that they're selling Tip Top specifically because it requires a level of investment beyond what it's willing to make. So it's decided to flick it on. Although a former Fonterra employee did tell me earlier this year, they spoke to me on condition of anonymity. They said that Fonterra had significantly underinvested in its Tip Top business and its ageing factory in South Auckland. So one could guess that an interested buyer is more interested in the brand rather than any machinery or factory assets.
Interesting. Let's move to crude oil prices, a 6-month high. So what is that going to mean when we go to fill up our cars?
Unfortunately, it's not good news for anyone who is having an extended Easter break and looking to return from a road trip probably later this week. The price of Brent crude oil rose 3.2% today and more so overnight last night. It's currently buying at $74.30 a barrel. And now this is because the United States says that it's going to reinstate sanctions on countries that buy oil from Iran. Now, Washington originally gave countries like China and India exemptions on financial penalties, those sanctions last year. But they've now said that they're not going to renew those exemptions next month on May the 1st. Now, that came to a surprise to the market, so obviously it caused prices to hike. And obviously this decision by the United States, its desire to essentially choke off any revenue that Iran makes from oil, that's obviously going to limit supply, and with limited supply comes higher prices. Now, I put this for a local angle. I put this to the chief executive of Z Energy, one of our country's largest fuel retailers, earlier today, and said, hey, will this hit us here? He said that if these recent increases do stick around for, say, the next couple of days, it's probably going to cause them to rise prices at the pump here.
OK, so what else happened on the markets today?
The NZX Top 50 index closed up about 0.5%. That was a rise of 45 points to close at, drumroll please, 10,004 points this evening.
We finally got there.
We finally got there. So that is the first time that we have ever smashed that 10,000 point mark. mark of the NZX ever in history. The New Zealand dollar is a bit less exciting. That's buying at 66.7 US cents, 93.6 to the Australian and 51.4 to the British pence.
I feel like we should have had a sort of tutor and some ticker tape. Okay, thanks, Madison.
I could have had some party poppers in here.
Exactly, Madison Reedy with business there. 4 Indian students who were kicked out of New Zealand because their immigration agents falsified documents have been granted visas to return here. The students who were deported in 2017 said they had no knowledge of the fraud. Their lawyer, Alastair McClymont, has received letters from the Associate Immigration Minister, Chris Fa'afoi, which say the ban on the 4 students travelling to New Zealand has been lifted. The 4 have been granted open work visas, which means they can come back here in the next 6 months and stay for a year. The visa fee has been waived and medical and police certificates aren't required. Manoj Nara is one of the students who got a visa reprieve. His parents spent $35,000, their life savings, on sending him to New Zealand the first time around. He spoke to me this afternoon from Hyderabad via Skype.
I have shared the information to my family, and I can't express in a single word of my happiness. What we are fighting from last 3 years, from 2016, May 17, we are fighting for this issue. I can't able to pay my parents' lifetime saving back to them. I felt very bad a part of my side because they want that happiness that our kid is going on, our son is growing up with the education person in our family, the first person in the family. They want that happiness, and they encourage their savings to my dream, to achieve my dream.
So what do you hope to achieve now then, that you get the chance to come back?
If I come back, I need to go chase my dream, and I need to help somewhat what I have borrowed from my parents. I need to give at least some amount to them. I want to build my career. That this multicultural experience will be help me, I thought. So that is the thing.
And what area do you work in, Manoj? What's your career?
Actually, I was a software engineer before coming to the New Zealand.
And will you do the same here?
I want to be in a management as well as in IT. So that's why I have chosen that business information systems. I have chosen that.
You said your family and friends were asking why you had returned. Why did you get kicked out of New Zealand? So do you feel now that your name has been cleared?
Yeah, I think once I got a visa, I want to say each and every person that I have not done anything wrong apart of myself. It was done by some person and I was punishable for that.
Manoj Nara there. 3 other Indian students have had their applications declined. Meanwhile, an immigration lawyer believes the government should have an amnesty for overseas students who have been sold the false dream of permanent residency in New Zealand. Alastair McClymont says hundreds of students are existing in the shadows here after being hoodwinked by agents. And he says those students need to be offered a legal pathway to stay on. Mr McClymont says while the new visas are a victory for 4 of his clients, there are about 150 others kept out in the cold.
What happens with a lot of these Indian students in particular is in order to come here and study, they have to borrow heavily and they have to repay their debts. And the only way they're ever going to be able to repay those is by working here in New Zealand. And that's why they borrow money to come here and study in the first place, because they believe that they're going to be able to earn that money and repay those debts. So this now gives them the opportunity of coming here and earning and repaying the debts which they incurred to study here in the first place.
Yeah, but does the packaging on the dream live up to
absolutely not, because basically what's being sold to them is a pathway to residency. And this is not just the corrupt education agents which are selling this dream. It's Immigration New Zealand, it's Education New Zealand, it's on Immigration New Zealand letters to the students. They're all being sold a pathway to residency, and that pathway simply does not exist. So they're being sold a false dream.
So, well, what should we do about that then?
Well, either you make that realistic and you actually provide a pathway to residency for students, or you stop lying to them.
And whose responsibility is it to
it's the government's.
enforce the truth-telling?
Well, it's the responsibility of you and I, probably, because the government is earning billions of dollars out of this industry, and the only way they can earn billions of dollars out of this industry is, so far, to sell these students a lie.
So do you think they're culpable in all of this because
Absolutely.
of that?
This government has made it a priority to stamp out exploitation of migrant workers and students, but the biggest exploiter is the New Zealand government, who sells this false dream to students. And the reason that these students become vulnerable is because they have to borrow so much money to pay for the courses of study here that is the start of that pathway to residency.
And when you say government, are you talking about this one, the one before it, or just governments generally?
Governments generally. And this has really been a trend which has happened over the last, say, half dozen years. I mean, prior to that, the student numbers were relatively small. And remember, we're talking about two different types of students here. We're talking about the students that come and do the master's degrees and the PhDs at the universities. We're not talking about those people. That's only about 10% of the international students. We're talking about the vast bulk of international students that come here to study low-level qualifications, who are not coming to gain those qualifications because they're useless. They're coming here so that they have the right to work after they graduate and the potential to gain residency. It's that pathway to residency which is what they're paying for.
Well, the government would argue it has brought the lid down on that to a degree.
Yes, they have. They've closed down a lot of the schools. They've opened up the open work visas, but ultimately they're still being sold a pathway to residency. And there is no pathway to residency to the vast majority of these students.
So, going back to the students that you have been working with, the people you've been working with, what has the cost been to them? And I don't just mean financially.
Well, basically for the last 3 years, their lives have been put on hold. Because they were brave enough to come out in the media and talk about what was going on, they've basically been ostracised and going back to India. Employers won't touch them because they're seen as troublemakers, because they will stand up and demand their rights. And Indian employers, they don't want to employ people like that. They don't want troublemakers. They want people who are going to sit quietly and just do their work. So they've had trouble getting jobs. They've had pressure from the families who have said, well, we borrowed all this money, we sold all these assets to send you to New Zealand to study, and you're coming back with nothing. People who get deported back to India, they have this, there's this stigma that's attached to them as being deported migrants, because in India it's the dream to migrate to a Western country, and if you don't achieve that, you're a failure. And everybody knows that you're a failure. The neighbours, the family, your workmates, your colleagues, everybody knows that you're a failure, and it affects their whole families.
Do you think New Zealanders understand that?
No, they don't. The main thing they don't understand is that the agents that are being used in India are agents recruited by New Zealand schools. They don't understand that the agents are paid by the New Zealand schools. They don't understand that the agents only get paid if the student visas are successful. So that's why the agents manipulate the documents so that the student visa applications will be successful, so that they will be paid by the New Zealand schools.
So in terms of the particular agency in these cases, right, has anything ever happened to them?
You can't. What can you do? I mean,
So nothing. They've scot-free.
No,
All of these students have been sent back, and their name is obviously put out there, but other than that?
Like if you have an education agent who develops a bad reputation with Immigration New Zealand, they just change the name of the agency, or they become a sub-agent. A sub-agent is someone who then provides potential students to an approved agent. And this is simply what they do. So they just carry on the same business, but they're just doing it under a different guise. It's impossible to regulate.
So zero comeback against the people who are at the core of this.
Absolutely. I mean, it is impossible to regulate. And I have some sympathy for the government when people say, well, we should regulate offshore education agents. It's impossible. You can't do it.
So this is 4 people. As you say, what about the rest?
Yeah,
what about the rest?
Well, there's hundreds.
What are you doing?
I mean, we constantly get people walking into our office who are saying, I came as a student in 2016, my visa was declined because they found some fake documents that the education agent had put in, and they've been overstaying here for years. And you ask them, well, how do you survive? And they just say, well, I beg, my friends give me some money, I've been disowned by my family because I'm a failure, they've had to sell all of their farmland and now they're completely in debt, and they're just living in the shadows.
Other people would say that is the risk you take, that is the punt you take. You pay your money, you take your chance.
Okay, but they went to these education agents who then had immigration officers going with the agents to education fairs. They had officials from Education New Zealand who were going with these education agents. They felt that there was some sort of guarantee, there was some sort of safety in the message that these Kiwis coming to India were promising them. Hey, you can come here and study, you can work, and there's a pathway to residency, it's easy. This is why they paid the money. They've been hoodwinked. It's a scam.
Right, so you say now is the time to tell the truth.
Yes.
Which sounds really simple. But aside from that, what else needs to be done?
Well, I think you basically need to give these guys an opportunity who are here in New Zealand to get back onto open work visas and actually give them some real opportunity of a pathway to residency.
So what are you saying, some kind of amnesty or something?
Absolutely.
For all of them?
Well, there are obviously criteria for their amnesty. In the amnesties in the past, there have always been criteria. They've always said, well, if you have arrived between this period, if you came on this particular visa, you don't have the criminal convictions, you don't have these types of things, then we can have an amnesty. It used to be that amnesties were quite regular. They were common.
Well, how are they going to work and live here?
There's plenty of jobs. They all manage to find jobs and to work and to live. I mean, it's not difficult. But the thing is that have to do it illegally if they don't have a visa, and that's when they become exploited. But what the problem we have here is that Immigration New Zealand's approach, the ministry, is to punish these people, is to find these people and to deport them and punish. And that's got to change.
OK, so I'm giving you the power now, right now. You can grant an amnesty. Who are you granting it to?
I would make it a criteria. Students who have arrived, say, from early 2016 onwards, who don't currently have visas, who don't have any criminal convictions, who haven't racked up big bills with the local hospitals, give them an opportunity to work for, say, 4 years if you're in Auckland or 1 year if you're outside of Auckland. If you're with an employer who has been approved by Immigration New Zealand as a trustworthy employer, then as long as you remain with that employer for that period of time, they'll grant a resident visa.
And how many people do you think that would cover off?
Hundreds, possibly thousands. But then the exploitation problem would disappear overnight. And the government's main immigration plan is to stamp down on migrant worker exploitation. If you do that, they will not be exploited.
Do you think that's politically palatable?
Well, no, because the New Zealand voters, they don't feel that way about migrants. Remember, the government was elected on partly anti-migrant rhetoric.
So what is the incentive to do it?
Because they want to stamp out exploitation of migrant workers, and this would stamp out exploitation of migrant workers overnight.
So you're saying being a transformational fair government is the incentive?
Yep, governing with kindness, compassion and empathy.
That's Alistair McClymont. It is about 9 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. As always, we're keen for your feedback, so do get in touch. You can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Disabled people who are unable to use their own bathrooms because of access issues want the government to speed up the process to have basic modifications made. Dunedin man Josh Perry has cerebral palsy and uses a wheelchair. He's been waiting 18 months to have his shower fixed so he can properly use it. Mr Perry says some people are waiting up to 2 years to have renovations funded, and he's launched a petition calling on the Health Minister to do better. Jonathan Mitchell reports.
Josh Perry has been living in his rented home for a couple of years. However, the bathroom does not meet his needs. There's a huge step to get into the shower, and to make matters worse, there's no shower door or curtain for privacy. He's been waiting for 1.5 years for Southern District Health Board and disability support provider Enable New Zealand to make decisions. He says it's an unpleasant process.
We had to fill out a massive amount of paperwork. The bureaucracy is unbelievable. The shower needs to be replaced. In my view, the toilet needs to be replaced, but that's not covered under the renovations. I'm getting a new door, so that will be good.
Mr Perry believes it's a systemic problem. He's heard from many others who have had to wait a long time for alterations.
There needs to be a public inquiry into this as soon as possible, so we disabled people can have confidence a new system that works for them.
Mr Perry has launched a petition calling on the Health Minister to address the long wait times. Local MP Michael Woodhouse has thrown his support behind the petition.
What we want is for members of the disabled community to be able to live as independently as well as other Kiwis. And I think that we are letting them down if we don't provide them with this sort of support.
He says it shouldn't take the intervention of his office to get action for Mr Perry, who finally got approval for the work last week. A spokesperson with CCS Disability Action, BJ Clark, says, unfortunately, waiting is a familiar term for disabled people. He says finding suitable housing can be incredibly difficult.
For a person that has some form of disability, it takes them a long time to find a property. A lot of our society, unfortunately, is still being designed to create issues for people to access these properties.
The Southern DHB says there have been challenges with Mr Perry's bathroom design, and they employed an architect to help work through the concerns. The DHB says it's not aware of other clients who have been waiting as long. However, it will continue to work with disability support provider Enable New Zealand to see if it can do things better. Josh Perry's petition to Parliament is available to sign until May the 5th. For Checkpoint, call Jonathan Mitchell, Tēnā.
And terrifying footage has emerged showing swimming pool water cascading from the top of a penthouse apartment block as a magnitude 6.1 earthquake struck the Philippines. Rescue teams are searching for signs of life beneath the rubble of a collapsed 4-storey commercial building after the quake shook the country's biggest island yesterday, killing at least 11 people. If you're watching, the video that's emerged shows the high-rise building apartment block Anchor Sky Suites swaying as the quake struck. Water from the penthouse swimming pool on the roof cascades down onto the ground. Terrified residents are then filmed running as the disaster hit. The earthquake was felt strongly in key business areas of Manila, with residential and office buildings evacuated after being shaken for several minutes. Excuse me. Residents in Auckland's Hauraki Gulf have witnessed a rare display of water spouts. The weather phenomenon was seen off the coast of Waiheke Island this morning, followed by heavy downpours and thunderstorms for other parts of the city. Tom Furley reports.
At around 8:30 this morning, Paul Dyson watched from his place on Palm Beach in Waiheke as 4 water spouts formed off the coast.
You could see the funnel from the cloud going down to the sea, and around the base of this water spout there was a huge amount of spray that you could see. And luckily I had a telephoto lens and got a few interesting photos of that first spout, including a boat going past, a small fishing boat.
The harbour master fortunately didn't get any reports of boats getting into strife because of it, but residents like Paul Dyson were treated to a spectacle as several formed over the space of about half an hour.
I could see the water spray in several spots, and then from those spray sites it developed the spout as well. So we ended up seeing 4 water spouts across, looking due north to Great Barrier Island and Little Barrier Island.
A meteorologist at the National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research, Ben Knoll, says it's a rare thing.
This is something you wouldn't necessarily expect to see in Auckland, New Zealand. You might see it in the Great Lakes, in the northeastern portion of the United States, as conditions can be more volatile in that part of the world. But for Auckland standards, I think seeing 4 or 5 in a row in one photo is quite impressive.
He says the autumnal conditions are ideal for water spouts.
Right now, our ocean temperatures around New Zealand and the Auckland region about 20 degrees Celsius. In this pocket of air that's above our heads, about 5 Celsius. That's a 15-degree temperature difference, and that is enough to create instability in the atmosphere and therefore producing these tornadic water spouts that we've seen around Auckland this morning.
The Met Service issued a severe thunderstorm warning for West Auckland, where 23 centimetres of rain fell in a single hour in Waitakere. While that was lifted mid-afternoon, the Met Service also warns of downpours and 2-centimetre hail across Auckland and the Coromandel Peninsula. It's recorded around 100 lightning strikes since this morning. Met Service meteorologist Andy Downs says there may be a few more rumbles, but things should ease.
Certainly as we progress
beyond around 6 or 7 o'clock, things should start dying away. The action then should, if anything, maybe potentially move over the Hauraki Gulf and away out to the northeast. And the good news is for Aucklanders is that tomorrow's looking at a much more settled day with plenty of sunshine.
Fire and Emergency says it hasn't had to respond to any flooding or lightning strikes. For Checkpoint, Tom Furley.
And before we get on to some of your feedback, just a statement through from the police here. They have arrested a 39-year-old man following the death of a 17-month-old. That's Sadie Lee Gardner. Now, Sadie Lee was taken to Auckland Starship Hospital from Tauranga with serious head injuries following an incident on the 27th of March, and she died on the 29th of March. A man is due to appear in the Tauranga District Court tomorrow charged with murder. Police are saying they'd like to thank the public for their assistance, but because the matter is now before the courts, they're not in a position to comment any further. So let's get to some of your feedback now. Alex Perrottet went to Manganui to revisit, a forestry project there, and we've had a bit of feedback from you on that. Jackie from Christchurch says, great story about Manganui, great to get follow-up on the progress of an initiative and to hear positive stories of Māori achievement aired on mainstream media. Thanks for your feedback, Jackie. And also this from Jeff Howe. That story on Manganui is a bloody good piece of public broadcast journalism and yet another example of why RNZ is a national treasure. I'm sure Alex Perrottet would love to be referred to as a national treasure. And on the Indian students, who some of them have got visas to come back after being deported, after their agents falsified documents, this texter says one way to lessen the problem would be to rescind citizenship and deport foreign employers who exploit workers. And this other person says it is Anthony is absolutely, I think it might mean Alistair, is absolutely correct with his description of Indian student exploitation. This person goes on to say there's prime examples of this problem in Invercargill. The whole city operates on exploitation of students who are doing low-level courses.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata tēnei. The 3 crew members of a helicopter that crashed in the sub-Antarctic Ocean last night have walked into Southland Hospital, apparently little the worse for wear. The pilot, a winchman and a paramedic had been on a medical evacuation mission to the Auckland Islands when their aircraft came down. Tess Brunton reports from Invercargill.
Lester Stevens, Andrew Hefford and medic John Lambeth walked out of the Otago rescue helicopter unaided in their bright orange flight suits this afternoon. They were found wandering along an Auckland Island beach this morning after some wreckage had been found 3 kilometres offshore. The rescue helicopter's chief pilot Graham Gale says they're in reasonably good shape after their ordeal. He says they made a shelter and kept each other warm and their spirits up during the night when a front brought in wet weather. In Invercargill, Tess Brunton, tēnei.
The manager of Southern Lakes Helicopters, Lloyd Matheson, told Checkpoint the men were wearing survival gear and life jackets and had trained for a water landing.
Amazing feat. I understand one of our crew was knocked unconscious on entering the water, so to get out of an aircraft that's ditched in the sea at night with no lights, no community around to support them, it just supports the training that we've put into these unexpected occurrences that front us now and again.
Lloyd Matheson says any investigation will need to find out why the beacons failed. A 39-year-old man has been charged with the murder of a 17-month-old girl in Tauranga. Sadie Lee Gardner died in Starship Hospital on March the 29th after sustaining serious head injuries in an incident 2 days before. The accused man is due to appear in the Tauranga District Court tomorrow. As the death toll climbs past 300, Sri Lanka is holding a day of mourning for the victims of the Easter Sunday attacks. A state of national emergency has come into force, giving the police and the military special powers to prevent further attacks and detain suspects without court orders. The BBC's Anbarasan Ethirajan is in the capital, Colombo.
More than 100 funerals are expected to take place. Many of those were killed on Easter Day bombings near the town of Negombo, just north of the capital, Colombo. The families have been preparing. It took time for the authorities to hand over some of these bodies. Because of the blast, they were very badly damaged. In some cases, they had to do DNA testing as well. And the government is observing a nationwide day of mourning where special prayers will be held in Buddhist and Hindu temples. And still, this country is reeling after these horrendous attacks on Sunday.
And Barasan Eferajan reporting. The Auckland Council has given the go-ahead for a controversial extension of Queen's Wharf. The 90-metre-long concrete extension called a dolphin structure will allow huge cruise ships to berth there. The council acknowledges that the work will have what it calls a range of adverse effects on the environment, both during construction and operation, but says these can be managed to an acceptable level. It says the extension will enable the cruise industry to grow and accommodate the increasing number of ships, more than 350 metres long, visiting Auckland. Anyone wishing to appeal against the decision has until May the 15th to do so. 4 Indian students who were kicked out of New Zealand because their immigration agents had falsified documents have been granted visas, allowing them to return. The students, who were among a number of deported in 2017, said they had no knowledge of the fraud. Their lawyer, Alistair McClymont, says has received letters from the Associate Immigration Minister Chris Foy saying the ban on 4 of the students travelling to New Zealand has been lifted. They've been granted open work visas, which means they can come back in the next 6 months and stay for a year. The visa fee has been waived and medical and police certificates will not be required. The US House Judiciary Committee has subpoenaed a former White House counsel. The committee wants Don McGahn to provide documents and testify as part of its investigation into the possible obstruction of justice by President Donald Trump. Mr McGahn was a key witness in the Mueller investigation, as the BBC's David Willis reports.
The Mueller report uncovered evidence of multiple attempts by the president to hinder or curtail the investigation into Russian interference, many of which failed because the people surrounding Mr. Trump declined to go along with them. A key example was Don McGahn, the former White House counsel, whom the president instructed to set in motion the removal of the special counsel and then lie about it. Mr. McGahn, in fact, did neither. And now the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Democrat Jerry Nadler, has added Mr. McGahn's name to the list of those he wants to interview, along with the special counsel Robert Mueller himself.
David Willis reporting. Met Service says the risk of hail and thunderstorms in Auckland should ease this evening. A severe thunderstorm watch was issued earlier for Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, and storms near Waiheke Island this morning caused several waterspouts to form. Meteorologist Andy Downs says about 100 lightning strikes have been recorded since this morning, but the stormy weather is starting to ease. He says thunderstorms are possible overnight and through tomorrow in northern parts of Gisborne, where a heavy rain watch is in place. It's 6:05. The Black Caps are playing down the lack of match play New Zealand bowlers are getting in the Indian Premier League and the impact it may have on the side's prospects at next month's World Cup. The bulk of the World Cup squad is playing in the IPL and aren't taking part in the second of 3 pre-World Cup camps in Christchurch this week. Fast bowler Lockie Ferguson has had the most game time of the New Zealanders in India, having played 5 of the 10 IPL games so far. Spinner Mitch Santner is next with just 3 games, while Tim Southee's play 2 and Trent Bolt and Ish Sodhi just 1. However, Black Caps assistant coach Shane Jurgensen says the bowlers are an experienced group and he's confident they'll remain match fit.
The biggest challenge for us is we had this big gap in terms of when we played last and also the World Cup and the 50-over cricket. The guys are putting in the work and that's all we can do is control those areas, and if they're physically ready to go, we can catch up on the game sort of stuff as we get to England.
Black Caps bowling coach Shane Jurgensen. The Tactics are desperate to turn around their ANZ Premiership netball season when they host the 3rd-placed Northern Stars in Christchurch tonight. The home side has won just 2 of their 9 games so far this season and sit at the bottom of the competition. The Liverpool football great Robbie Fowler has made his first serious move into coaching after being named head coach of A-League strugglers Brisbane Roar. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Trevor Riki chats with Moana Maniapoto of Moa Hunter fame in the wake of recognition of her album Tahi as a classic. There's a window on the world of snooker in China, apparently popular with the young and hip in that country. And our physicist Sean Hendy is going to tell you what time it is using dimensional analysis on Nights with William Ray. He's after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. For Northland to Waikato, including Coromandel, long fine spells, a few showers, some heavy and thundery with hail easing this evening. Bay of Plenty, Waitomo, Taranaki and Central High Country. A few showers today, areas of cloud tomorrow. Manganui to Kapiti Coast, isolated showers clearing tonight, otherwise mostly fine with areas of low cloud, mainly morning and night. For Gisborne, showers possibly heavy and thundery tomorrow. Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa and Wellington, occasional drizzle clearing Wellington tomorrow. Nelson and Marlborough, showers clearing today, morning and evening cloud tomorrow. Marlborough Sounds and Kaikoura Coast, Canterbury and Otago, mostly fine, however areas of low cloud and patchy drizzle morning and night. For Bulla and Westland, fine today, cloudy periods tomorrow. Fiordland and Southland, mainly fine inland, but a few showers developing about the coast this evening. Chatham Islands, often cloudy, patchy drizzle. It's 6:08. You're with RNZ National.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. 3 men rescued from an Auckland Islands beach in the sub-Antarctic after their helicopter crash have walked into Southland Hospital this afternoon. The 2 pilots and medic were feared dead after wreckage from the helicopter they were flying in was found this morning. They were on their way to evacuate a person from a fishing boat when they crashed yesterday near the Auckland Islands, about 450 kilometres south of New Zealand. Sir Richard Hayes, the Chief Executive and Chief Pilot for Southern Lakes Helicopters, went to search for the missing trio, and he's on the line now. Sir Richard, this is absolutely remarkable, isn't it?
Well, put it this way, it's one of the most incredible things that I've come across in 40-odd years of aviation. Like, to have a result like we found here today when we went south, expecting the worst after 15 hours of no communication. What a tremendous result. It was like winning lotto, believe me.
So were you on the chopper that found them?
Yes, I was flying one of our aircraft. We got tripped up a little bit by weather that went through overnight and fog there this morning. There was a fishing fleet, 4 or 5, searching in the area, and they give us a weather report that had cleared, so we flew down. And it was on the first approach and flying the profile that Andrew flew last night, that one of my crewmen saw orange figures in orange immersion suits on the beach about a kilometre away.
So tell what goes through your head when the person on board with you says, "I can see them. There they are."
The first thing you think of is he looking at someone floating in the water or someone standing on the beach? In this case, it was standing on the beach. Lisa, it was just great. We saw 2 for a start, and I thought, well, this was great. And then the third stood up, so we got landed and ferried them back across to Enderby in 2 loads. But no, absolutely thrilled to pieces that they survived.
What did they say to you? What were their first words to you?
I think it was along the lines of, that's the best sound we've ever heard in our life, and they've heard it a million times. The sound of a helicopter approaching. Yes.
Have they told you much about how they managed to get ashore? What do you know?
Not a lot. We're going to have a debrief tomorrow, and they were flown into Southland Hospital, and I don't even think none of them have arrived back here just right now. But we'll have a debrief tomorrow. And we will try and work out, what happened and what took place. But it's early days yet.
But just basics. Did they tell you whether they had to swim ashore? What did they do during the night? Because it was quite a long wait.
Yeah, they extracted themselves from the aircraft. Any flight over water, they have to go through Hewitt training, which is helicopter emergency underwater training, and they train for it. And I guess that kicks in when the chips are down, and they extracted themselves from the aircraft, and it was dark by then, and they swam ashore. It took about 20 minutes, and into sort of a bluff system, and then they walked around up into the bush, and where they sheltered overnight, still in their wet immersion suits, until we arrived today.
I understand that one of them may have, might have been knocked out at the point of impact. Is that right? Did someone have to help them out?
No, no one helped him out. He was unconscious. He was knocked out. He was unconscious. He was a winch operator and has no recollection of actually the impact. And he got himself out. Whether or not the training kicked in, by second nature, we don't know. But he got himself out into the water and then come around, and I think they may have even been sat on the aircraft before it sunk, and then they had to swim to shore. Yes.
So about 16 hours passes, right, between their last contact and when they find you. When you arrived, did they tell you should have hurried up a bit? What did they do for the 16 hours?
I think there was a cold front come through during the night, and they knew that no one would be coming in those conditions, albeit that it was pretty good when they went down there. But then we still had the same conditions this morning. It wasn't until around about 9 o'clock that it cleared away. But they did. They did say that they were starting to wonder who was going to turn up. They did see one of the boats poke its nose around the corner, and they did shine a light at it last night. But the people on the fishing trawler never saw it. But no, look, what a result. You never expect anything to happen like this on
hand on heart.
Watch.
Yeah, hand on heart, Sir Richard. What were you actually expecting the outcome to be?
Well, after last contact at 7:37 last night from our Track Plus, the last hit, as we call it, to tell us where the aircraft is and where it's tracking in height and speed, and no communication from them landing, and no satellite, no sat phone coverage. That is right through the night, etc. And we arrived at 11 o'clock today, so we were expecting the worst. There's not a doubt about that. So. To have it on the reverse side of it, it is just such a great result. Everyone is very, very happy in my camp tonight.
Who told their families? Did you make that call?
I did. Myself and my operations manager Lloyd Matheson. We went round the families last night and said we'd lost contact with them. We're trying to establish comms. But we don't know why we haven't got comms with them, and that's about what it is. Because we didn't know. The satellite coverage can go out at times, but so yes.
And so, who called to say that these three were alive? Did you get to do that job as well?
I called on the sat phone when we saw them all standing on the beach. I dialed out on the sat phone and talked back to the office and said, we have them, they're all on the beach, they're standing, everyone's here, they're counted for, so fantastic.
And what was that conversation like? What was the reaction back at the office?
I think there was a lot of yelling and shouting and cheering, as you would understand and expect from the crew here, because it had been a pretty rough night on everyone. Expecting, hoping for the best, but deep down expecting the worst when there'd been no communications with them for that length of time.
Career highlight for you, or just a major relief?
Both. I think in my 40-plus years of aviation, it would have to be the most exhilarating find we've ever had. Especially when it's on your watch and part of our crew to end up with a result like this. It's just unbelievable.
And I know when the dust settles, obviously they're going to have to look at the cause of the crash. The EPIRB, I understand the beacon didn't go off. Do you have any clues? Was weather bad? What kind of chopper is it?
It's a BK117, a twin-engine used right throughout the country on medevacs and SAR ops. No, we don't know what happened and how it ended up in that situation, but there will be a full investigation into it. With ourselves and the Transport Accident Investigation guys, and we'll try and decipher out anything out of it, and so anyone can learn from it.
So, Sir Richard, before you go this evening, the three men, how would you describe their mood this evening?
Well, I only saw them for a brief period of time, but I would say they're very happy to be away from there. They were cold and wet. They were still in their immersion suits, and they've been huddling up in the bush together for the night. It was a pretty wild old night down there that it turned into after 12, and they were pretty happy to get a hot coffee into them over at the hut. So very, very happy to be home.
It's lovely to talk to you. That is Sir Richard Hayes, and he was with the crew, obviously, that located these 3 men who went missing after their helicopter went down. As he said, they were on a beach on the northeastern side of Enderby Island, and they were found this morning some 16 hours after their last communication. It's just absolutely a remarkable story of survival. A Christchurch homeowner says lengthy delays in resolving his earthquake insurance claim is destroying his finances and affecting his kids' health. More than 8 years after the quakes, government-owned insurer Southern Response is still processing 500 Canterbury earthquake claims. One of those claims is from Christchurch architect Bob Burnett, who is at his wits' end and is calling for a royal commission into the conduct of the insurance sector. Logan Church went to meet him.
Welcome to my beautiful, epic, high-end architectural home.
Bob Burnett is a successful Christchurch architect who's won numerous awards and accolades. His family home in Kashmir, which he shares with his wife, a fellow architect, and 2 kids, is also award-winning, featuring in several architectural books. Those pictures show a sleek kitchen, modern bathrooms, natural stone cladding, but come the February 2011 earthquakes,
there was significant damage, and we had to move out of this house.
Some of that damage included large cracking in the concrete walls and floors. But of course, this is all old news.
We thought it's a repair all day, every day in the beginning. And, back in 2011, February 22nd, when we moved...
That was Checkpoint almost 3 years ago, when then opposition MPs Andrew Little and Megan Woods came to Bob's house to talk about policy changes they wanted to make if Labour got into power. But today, not much has changed at the house, after initial repair attempts were abandoned years ago. And there's no settlements yet with insurer Southern Response.
We've been in limbo, basically. There's been lots of different engineering reports being done. There's been lots of long gaps between drinks where there's been not a lot happening.
Essentially, this house, which Bob admits has a complex design, looks exactly the same. Quake damage still visible, the flooring ripped up, internal cladding ripped off. Also, downstairs.
One thing I just wanted to talk about is the smell. There's an incredible smell in here, and that is from the toilets. Over time, the water has evaporated, it's gone, and we can smell directly what's coming out of the sewer.
I'll just take you upstairs, show you up there. Upstairs was our office and a meeting room.
This part of the house looks over the whole of Christchurch. The view is breathtaking. Bob is part of a class action against Southern Response. 24 homeowners were involved. And while 20 of those homeowners settled their claims in an alternative resolution process, Bob is not one of them. And he says that has had a massive impact on his family. Bob has 2 kids, Lenny and Sebastian, now 8 and 11. They have grown up in substandard rentals which were cold, damp and mouldy. Bob says there was no other accommodation at the time. They've developed quite serious asthma.
So when we moved out of the first rental, we had to clean the mould off our furniture and off the bottom of the leather sofa and stuff, so rising damp, and that home was almost impossible to heat, even with dehumidifiers and heaters running because it was damp.
And money is another problem.
We've lost our home, but we've still got a massive mortgage to pay.
And that mortgage is?
Probably around $600,000. This is probably a $2 million property.
Behind the brave face, you can see the huge toll this is taking on Bob. And he's worried that he's not the only one. He says that there needs to be drastic changes to the insurance sector so that such lengthy delays to settling claims can't happen again.
I definitely think there needs to be an overhaul of the insurance situation in New Zealand. And the insurance companies need to be regulated, and they need to be held to account when they behave badly. And other countries, this sort of thing wouldn't be allowed to happen. I'd like to see a royal commission into the insurance industry. It's really had a huge adverse effect on people's lives, and in our case, we've been in limbo for 8 years. And
the minister responsible for Southern Response, Megan Woods, is no stranger to this house. As previously mentioned, she and Andrew Little stood in this house in 2016, promising big changes. We invited Megan Woods back here. She said she hopes Bob's claim could be resolved by that alternative dispute resolution process in the coming months.
And there actually is hope for Bob. Hopefully in the next couple of months we can get a resolution of his claim. His family can get their life back together and they can finally get to live in this beautiful house that was a real dream for them. And that is the outcome that I need to see as Minister, and that is when I will call what I'm doing in this role a success.
But she acknowledges Bob has been let down.
Look, I think a number of people have been let down. I think Southern Response have said themselves that they have let Bob down in this instance. I have not been backward in coming forward, that things needed to change. And that when I became Minister, that was something that I was intent on, that we couldn't just continue with the processes that were in place when we took office and expect claims to be settled. And that's why I've used a number of levers to set up alternative ways to settle claims, and we are finally starting to see some traction on that.
On Bob's call for a royal commission into the insurance sector, Ms Wood says she will wait to see what comes out of the current EQC inquiry before looking at anything else. That inquiry, led by Dame Sylvia Cartwright, is now calling for public submissions. But Ms Wood says her focus for now is getting all remaining claims settled.
There's around 500 that are still with Southern Response.
500?
Yes, there's around 500. This time a year ago, I think that was around 1,000. So we have settled 500 in a year. I'm certainly talking very often with Southern Response about how it is that we settle the remaining 500, because it is certainly my desire and something that I have made very clear in the 18 months that I've been Minister, that we need to settle claims.
And that's something that could not come soon enough for Bob. Southern Response sent us a statement on Bob's situation. It says Mr Burnett's claim is technically complex and has had a number of setbacks. Southern Response acknowledges that the way in which they had managed the claim historically has not been acceptable. It also says they expect the remaining 4 customers in the class action, including Bob, to follow the same alternative resolution process as the other 20 customers within the next 2 months. Their expectation is that the process will enable Bob's claim to be settled. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Logan Church.
Pukeariki Museum in New Plymouth is celebrating the 100th anniversary of its collection with a special exhibition, Whare Kahurangi, or House of Treasured Possessions. It showcases the museum's toanga Māori along with a host of contributions from the public. Our Taranaki Wanganui reporter Robin Martin went along to take a look.
Pukeariki's forerunner, the Taranaki Museum, opened its doors in August 1919. Its beginnings were largely due to the generosity of its founding father and avid collector, William Henry Skinner. The curator of Whare Kahurangi, Chanel Carrick, says his collection provides an important snapshot of the region's history.
Skinner was a surveyor, so he had a lot of opportunity to get to know and spend time with Māori communities all through Taranaki. So he developed a collection of taonga Māori that is incredibly significant, and he donated that collection to the City of New Plymouth on the condition that they build a museum to house it. So he really was the catalyst behind the establishment of the Taranaki Museum.
Ms Carrick says Skinner did not simply just collect objects.
He wrote diary entries about his collections. He noted where he purchased things or who gifted them to him, who had owned them in the past, where he'd found things, if he found things directly. And that's really important for us today as a museum, because it helps us to trace the provenance of those objects and actually reconnect them with tangata whenua, because of course the way we think about taonga today is very different to the way that Skinner and his contemporaries thought about it.
Ms Carrick says working with Skinner's material, which includes a rare huru kuri or dog skin cloak, got her thinking about collections in general and why people collect in the first place. The call was put out, and about a third of the collections featured in Whare Kahurangi are from members of the public. One of Ms Carrick's favourites is a collection of swan dries.
The collector has, I think, maybe about 100 swan dries, and he's just collected them over the years and finds them in op shops and people give them to him. It's not really the kind of thing that you would normally think someone would collect, but it's actually really fascinating, because when you get into the history of them, They're all really beautifully tailored. They have different fits, different shapes, different colours. They're a lot more unique, I think, than people realise.
Alice Franklin is a children's librarian. She's donated her collection of living dead dolls to the exhibition.
They're a series of 10-inch horror-related figures, sort of cute, creepy. I started collecting them when I was 15, where my dad bought me one in a comic book store in Wellington. And then I just fell in love with them and been collecting them ever since.
Ms. Franklin now has 24 of the dolls, each of which comes with a unique backstory.
My first doll, he got locked in a trunk, and so that's how he passed, because he was a ventriloquist. The clown there, she was murdered by another clown and painted in his image, and now they go out. Thump over here, his story is he's things that go bump in the night, so he's the embodiment of all spooky things in the night.
Now 28, Ms. Franklin says the dolls still fascinate her, and she's got one more coming in the mail. Museum visitor Eloise Finer appreciated the display.
Just how cute they are, but the stories behind them. How each of them is a different story, but they all look creepy, but yet they're cute. It's cool. I like it.
Naoma Tamatia had a different take on cute.
I think it's the ladybug one. It's the one that drew our attention, pretty much. The little cute tea set, there's so much cute things in there as well.
While Helen Lawney was just taken aback by what people would choose to collect.
Just amazing what people do collect. The dolls, I've never seen those particular dolls. Bit creepy. Love the ladybirds, but you can collect anything. Just makes you realise that, anything goes.
Whare Kahurangi runs at the Pukeariki Museum until October the 6th. I ngā mutu mo te hōtaka o te ahi ponei, ko Robin Martin.
And just a quick bit of feedback before we go. The story we had on some students being allowed to return to New Zealand after being deported because of a visa scam. This from Peter Moore in Christchurch. It's simply not true to suggest that only migrants without current visas get exploited. I'm representing 2 workers who came here legally and were badly exploited. I've represented others in the past. The biggest single issue is that new migrants don't know their rights, and if they do, they don't want to make a fuss. If their visa is tied to them working for a certain employer, they are keen not to lose their job. Peter goes on to say, recently immigration has got amazingly good at getting new visas for exploited workers. Kudos for the government for that dramatic change. That is all we have time for this evening. It's been great to have your company. Check out our stories online. Catch you tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Sir Richard Hayes, one of the rescuers who found a trio whose chopper crashed in the sub-Antarctic Ocean, says it was an exhilarating experience and they were thrilled to pieces to find the 3 men alive and well on Auckland Island. He says the men told them the helicopter sound was the best noise they'd ever heard after swimming to shore and spending the night huddled for warmth on the beach. They are now in Southland Hospital, but none are seriously hurt. Immigration New Zealand has created a special visa category for people directly affected by last month's terror attacks on 2 Christchurch mosques and their families. It says this will provide certainty to those on temporary and resident visas. 4 Indian students deported in 2017 after their immigration agents falsified documents are now allowed to return. Their lawyer has received letters from Associate Immigration Minister Chris Foy saying the ban on 4 of the students travelling to New Zealand has been lifted.